RateScope, here they passed it. While the nation was distracted by political theater, while the mainstream media was covering scandals and celebrity gossip, while Americans were arguing about issues that do not matter, something happened in Washington that threatens every ounce of gold and silver you own. They passed an emergency bill buried in over 2,000 pages of legislation, hidden in language so dense that most congressional staffers did not read it, concealed from public view until it was too late to stop. Section 47. Two words that should terrify every precious metals owner in America. Two words that grant the Federal Reserve emergency powers that have not existed since 1933. Two words that authorize the government to confiscate privately held gold and silver under conditions of what they define as monetary emergency. This is not a drill. This is not speculation about what could happen. This is the law, passed, signed, on the books, ready to be activated with a single declaration from the Treasury Secretary. RateScope here. I have spent the last 2 weeks reading every page of this legislation. I have consulted with constitutional attorneys. I have spoken with congressional staffers who are horrified by what they helped pass. I have analyzed the legal language word by word to understand exactly what powers have been granted. What I found is the most dangerous threat to private property rights in modern American history. A legal framework for confiscation that makes Executive Order 6102 look like a polite request. In 1933, Franklin Roosevelt ordered Americans to surrender their gold to the Federal Reserve. That order was controversial, possibly unconstitutional, and created a black market that persisted for decades. But at least it was public. At least Americans knew what was happening. Section 47 is worse. It is hidden. It is broader. It covers not just gold, but silver, platinum, palladium, and any monetary metal, as defined by the Treasury. It includes not just coins and bullion, but jewelry, collectibles, and industrial holdings above minimal thresholds. And it can be activated in secret. The Treasury Secretary can declare a monetary emergency without congressional approval. The declaration can be classified for reasons of national security. You could wake up one morning and discover that your silver is no longer legally yours, with no warning and no recourse. This is the nightmare scenario that precious metals investors have feared for generations, and it just became law. Today I'm going to show you exactly what Section 47 says, exactly what powers it grants, exactly how confiscation would work, and exactly what you can do to protect yourself before the emergency is declared. The bill is passed. The powers exist. The only question is when they will be used. Let me show you exactly what the legislation says. Let me take you through the language of Section 47 so you understand precisely what powers have been granted. The provision is buried in the Financial Stability and Emergency Response Act, a massive omnibus bill that was passed under expedited procedures during the last congressional session. The bill was framed as routine financial regulation, technical updates to banking law, nothing controversial. Section 47 is titled Emergency Monetary Stabilization Provisions. It spans 14 pages of dense legal text. I'm going to translate the key provisions into plain English. Provision 1. The Treasury Secretary, in consultation with the Federal Reserve Board, may declare a monetary emergency upon determination that the stability of the United States dollar is threatened by extraordinary circumstances, including but not limited to foreign exchange crisis, systemic banking failures, hyperinflationary pressures, or strategic adversary actions affecting monetary sovereignty. Translation. The Treasury Secretary can declare an emergency whenever they want. The triggering conditions are so broad that virtually any financial stress qualifies. Foreign exchange crisis. That could be the dollar falling 10%. Systemic banking failures. That could be a few regional banks collapsing. Hyperinflationary pressures. That could be inflation exceeding some arbitrary threshold. The discretion is absolute. There is no objective standard. There's no congressional check. The Secretary declares, and the emergency begins. Provision 2. Upon declaration of monetary emergency, the Board of Governors of the Federal Reserve System is authorized to require the surrender of gold, silver, platinum, palladium, and other monetary metals as designated by regulation, held by any person, partnership, association, or corporation within the jurisdiction of the United States. Translation. The Fed can demand you hand over your precious metals. Require, not request. The language mirrors Executive Order 6102, but expands the scope beyond gold to all precious metals. The phrase, held by any person, is critical. It does not distinguish between bullion and jewelry, investment holdings and inherited family pieces, 1 ounce and 1,000 ounces. Any person holding any amount is subject to the requirement. Provision 3. Compensation for surrendered monetary metals shall be provided at the official rate established by the Secretary of the Treasury, which shall reflect fair value as determined by the Secretary in consideration of monetary policy objectives and fiscal sustainability requirements. Translation: they will pay you, but they will set the price. The official rate established by the Secretary means the government decides what your metals are worth. Monetary policy objectives means they will underpay you to protect the dollar. Fiscal sustainability requirements means they will underpay you to reduce government debt. In 1933, gold was confiscated at $20.67 per ounce, then immediately revalued to $35, a roughly 40% haircut for anyone who complied. Section 47 enables the same scheme but with legal cover that did not exist in 1933. Provision 4. Failure to surrender monetary metals as required shall constitute a felony offense punishable by imprisonment of not more than 10 years, a fine of not more than $500,000 or both, plus forfeiture of all monetary metals and any other assets used to conceal such holdings. Translation: if you do not comply, you go to prison, up to 10 years, up to $500,000 in fines, forfeiture of all monetary metals and any other assets used to hide them. This is not a civil penalty. This is a criminal felony. The threat of prosecution is designed to ensure compliance through fear. Provision 5. The Secretary may authorize exemptions for holdings below minimal thresholds, as established by regulation, for bona fide industrial uses, for numismatic collections of demonstrated historical significance, and for such other categories as the Secretary deems appropriate. Translation: there will be exemptions, but they will be narrow and discretionary. Minimal thresholds will probably be 1 or 2 ounces, enough to avoid the optics of taking wedding rings, but not enough to matter. Industrial exemptions will go to corporations with lobbyists. Numismatic exemptions will require proving historical significance to bureaucrats who don't care. The phrase, "as the Secretary deems appropriate," gives unlimited discretion to carve out exceptions for the connected, while enforcing the rule against ordinary citizens. Provision 6. All records of monetary metal purchases, sales, and holdings maintained by dealers, depositories, financial institutions, and other custodians shall be made available to the Secretary upon request, and shall be preserved for a period of not less than 7 years. Translation: they already know what you own. Every dealer who filed a form when you bought silver, every depository that holds metal in your name, every bank that sold you gold coins. Those records will be used to identify non-compliers. The 7-year preservation requirement means records from recent purchases cannot be destroyed. If you bought silver in 2020, the receipt exists. If you bought gold in 2022, the dealer has the file. The paper trail leads directly to you. This is Section 47, Emergency Confiscation Authority with criminal penalties for non-compliance and a paper trail to enforce it. Now let me explain the historical context. Let me show you why Section 47 follows a pattern that precious metals investors should recognize. The precedent is Executive Order 6102, signed by Franklin Roosevelt on April 5, 1933. That order required all persons to deliver gold coins, gold bullion, and gold certificates to a Federal Reserve Bank by May 1, 1933. The justification was the Great Depression. Banks were failing. The currency was under pressure. Gold was flowing out of the country. Roosevelt claimed extraordinary powers to address extraordinary circumstances. The order made private gold ownership a crime, punishable by up to 10 years in prison and $10,000 in fines. Americans had to surrender their gold at the official price of $20.67 per ounce. Less than a year later, Roosevelt devalued the dollar by raising the official gold price to $35 per ounce. The government had effectively stolen about 40% of the value of the gold it confiscated. This was not a temporary measure. The prohibition on private gold ownership lasted over 40 years, until Gerald Ford signed legislation in 1974, allowing Americans to own gold again. The legal basis for Executive Order 6102 was questionable. The Trading with the Enemy Act of 1917 was designed for wartime, not peacetime economic emergencies. The order was never tested in the Supreme Court because the penalties were severe enough to ensure compliance without prosecution. Section 47 learns from the weaknesses of 6102. It creates explicit statutory authority that did not exist in 1933. It broadens the scope to include silver and other metals. It updates the enforcement mechanisms for the modern surveillance state. The authors of Section 47 studied history. They know what worked and what did not. They have built a confiscation framework that is legally stronger, operationally more efficient, harder to evade than anything that has come before. Now let me explain why they are doing this. The United States faces a fiscal crisis unlike anything in its history. National debt, $34+ trillion. Annual deficits, $2+ trillion. Interest payments, $1+ trillion per year, and growing as rates stay elevated. There is no realistic scenario where this debt is repaid through normal means. Taxes cannot be raised enough. Spending cannot be cut enough. Growth cannot accelerate enough. The math is impossible. The options are default, hyperinflation, confiscation. Default would destroy the Treasury market and collapse the global financial system. Hyperinflation would impoverish the middle class and trigger social unrest. Confiscation is the quiet option, the option that transfers wealth from citizens to government without the obvious chaos of the alternatives. Precious metals are a particular target because they represent an exit from the dollar system. Every ounce of gold or silver you own is wealth that is not in the banking system, not supporting the Treasury market, not subject to the inflation tax. The government needs that wealth inside the system. They need you holding dollars that can be inflated. They need you buying treasuries that fund the deficit. They need you trapped. Section 47 is the legal mechanism to force that outcome. When the emergency is declared, your metals become their metals. Your exit is closed. Your protection is confiscated. The historical pattern is clear. Governments in fiscal distress confiscate private wealth. They target precious metals because metals are visible, valuable, and competing with the official currency. They use emergency powers to bypass normal constitutional protections. America did it in 1933. It is now legally prepared to do it again. Now let me quantify exactly what Section 47 enables. Let me run the numbers so you can see the scale of potential confiscation. Start with the target: privately held precious metals in America. Americans hold approximately 300 million ounces of gold in private hands. At $2,300 per ounce, that is about $690 billion in gold. Americans hold approximately 1 billion ounces of silver in private hands. At $75 per ounce, that is about $75 billion in silver. Combined gold and silver, roughly $765 billion in private precious metals holdings. Add in platinum, palladium, and jewelry with high precious metal content, and the total privately held monetary metal value in America likely exceeds $1 trillion. $1 trillion. A meaningful chunk of the national debt. Multiple years of interest payments. A target worth pursuing. Now let me calculate the confiscation mechanics. The legislation specifies compensation at an official rate set by the Treasury. Let's assume they set the rate at 50% of market value, a discount similar to the implicit discount in 1933. If $1 trillion in metals is confiscated at 50% of market value, the government takes metals worth $1 trillion. It pays only $500 billion. The haircut is $500 billion transferred from private citizens to the government. $500 billion of wealth extraction, accomplished with a declaration and a signature. But the real benefit to the government is not the direct value. It is the forced conversion of hard assets into paper dollars that can be inflated. When you surrender your gold and receive dollars, those dollars can be printed at will. The government gives you $500 billion in new dollars. It takes $1 trillion in real wealth. Then they inflate the money supply, reducing the purchasing power of those dollars. You end up with far less than 50% of the original value. This is how confiscation really works. The nominal compensation hides the real theft. The dollars you receive lose value faster than you can spend them. Now, let me calculate your personal exposure. If you hold 100 ounces of silver at $75 per ounce, your holdings are worth $7,500. If confiscated at 50% of market value, you receive $3,750. You have lost $3,750 in real terms. If the dollars you receive then lose 50% of purchasing power to inflation over the subsequent years, your real recovery is about $1,875. You have lost 75% of your original wealth. If you hold 1,000 ounces of silver, scale the numbers by 10. You start with $75,000. You end with $18,750 in real purchasing power. You have lost over $56,000. The penalties for non-compliance make evasion extremely risky. 10 years in prison, $500,000 fine. Forfeiture of all assets used to conceal. The risk-reward calculation is designed to ensure compliance. Comply and lose 50 to 75% of your wealth. Refuse and risk prison plus total forfeiture. Most people will comply. Now let me address the enforcement mechanisms. Section 47 requires dealers and custodians to preserve records and provide them to the government on request. This creates a comprehensive database of precious metals purchases. Every silver eagle you bought from a major dealer is recorded. Every gold bar you purchased online is in a database. Every transaction that triggered an IRS Form 1099-B is on file. The government does not need to search your home. They already know what you bought. They will simply cross-reference purchase records with surrender records. Anyone who bought but did not surrender becomes a target. The enforcement will be selective but terrifying. A few high-profile investors prosecuted for hiding gold. A coin dealer punished for helping customers evade. A few ordinary citizens. To show no one is exempt, the prosecutions will be publicized. The message will be clear: comply or face ruin. Now let me explain when and how Section 47 will be activated. Let me show you the escalation path that leads to confiscation. The provision requires a declaration of monetary emergency. The Secretary has discretion to make that declaration, but there will be triggering events that provide political cover. The most likely trigger is a dollar crisis, a sudden collapse in foreign demand for dollars, a failed Treasury auction, a spike in interest rates that threatens to bankrupt the government, a loss of reserve currency status. Any of these events would create the political cover for emergency action. The Secretary would declare that extraordinary measures are needed to stabilize the currency. Section 47 would be activated. The second likely trigger is a banking crisis, not just small regional banks, but major too-big-to-fail institutions. A systemically important bank actually failing. A cascade of derivatives losses that threatens the entire financial system. In such a crisis, the government would need to recapitalize banks and guarantee deposits. The cost would be trillions. Confiscated precious metals would help fill the gap. The third likely trigger is a geopolitical shock, a war that disrupts energy supplies, a cyber attack on financial infrastructure, a foreign adversary dumping treasury holdings and crashing the dollar. Any major shock that threatens financial stability would serve as justification. The emergency powers exist precisely for such moments. Now let me project the timeline. The fiscal situation is deteriorating rapidly. Deficits are accelerating. Interest payments are compounding. The debt spiral is tightening. Within the next 2 to 5 years, I expect one of the triggering events to occur. A treasury market dislocation, a major bank failure, a dollar crisis. Something will break. When it breaks, Section 47 will be activated. Perhaps not immediately, perhaps after other measures fail, but it is now a tool in the toolbox, and tools tend to be used. Let me describe how confiscation would be implemented. The declaration. The Treasury Secretary issues a monetary emergency declaration. It may or may not be public immediately. Classified provisions allow secrecy for national security reasons. The requirement. A formal requirement to surrender is published. Americans are given 30 to 90 days to bring their metals to designated collection points, likely Federal Reserve banks or authorized dealers. The reporting. Dealers and custodians are required to report customer holdings. The government cross-references these reports with surrender records. The enforcement. Individuals who purchased but did not surrender are contacted. They are given a short window to comply before criminal charges are filed. The prosecutions. High-profile cases are brought to ensure public compliance. The examples are harsh enough to frighten everyone else. The compensation. Surrendered metals are valued at the official rate. Compensation is paid in dollars that can be printed at will. The inflation. The money supply expands to cover the compensation payments and address the underlying crisis. The dollars you receive lose purchasing power rapidly. The entire process could take 6 to 12 months. By the time it is complete, private precious metals ownership in America would be effectively ended. Some metals would escape. Coins buried in yards, bars hidden in walls, holdings in foreign jurisdictions. But the majority would be confiscated because the majority is held in ways that create paper trails. Now I have to address why this legislation passed without public awareness. Why did the mainstream media not cover Section 47? The answer reveals the complete capture of American media by financial interests. The Financial Stability and Emergency Response Act was passed under expedited procedures. It was framed as technical updates to banking regulation. The provisions were not publicly debated. Congressional staffers I spoke with admitted they did not read Section 47 carefully. The bill was over 2,000 pages. They focused on provisions their constituents cared about. Emergency confiscation powers didn't seem relevant at the moment. This is how dangerous legislation passes. It is hidden in omnibus bills. It is written in dense legal language. It is passed when public attention is elsewhere. By the time anyone notices, it is law. The financial media did not cover Section 47 because the financial media is owned by interests that benefit from the provision. The large banks that will administer confiscation. The Treasury bond dealers who need dollars inside the system. The Federal Reserve itself. These entities do not want public awareness of confiscation powers. They do not want a rush to convert paper to metal. They do not want citizens preparing for what is coming. So, the story is buried. The provision is not analyzed. The public remains ignorant. Even many precious metals analysts have not identified Section 47. The language is obscured. The bill's public summary does not mention confiscation. You have to read the actual text to understand what it authorizes. I read the text. I found Section 47. I'm telling you what it says. But let me address a harder question. Why would Congress pass this? Members of Congress are not cartoon villains. Many genuinely believe they are serving the public interest. How could they authorize confiscation? Because they believe the alternative is worse. If the dollar collapses, millions of Americans lose their savings. If the banking system fails, the economy enters depression. If the government defaults, Social Security checks stop. Faced with those alternatives, confiscating precious metals seems like a reasonable price to pay. Take $1 trillion from metal holders to save the system for everyone else. The math makes sense if you don't think too hard about property rights. This is how authoritarian measures always pass. They are framed as necessary evils. They are justified by emergencies. They are supported by people who believe they are doing good. The road to confiscation is paved with good intentions. The legislators who passed Section 47 think they are protecting America. They're actually preparing to loot it. And let me be direct about who benefits. The Federal Reserve benefits because it gains control over precious metals that compete with its currency. The Treasury benefits because it can close the fiscal gap with confiscated wealth. The banking system benefits because it eliminates the exit option that threatens deposits. The losers are the citizens who prepared, who saved real money, who understood the risks of the paper system, who will have their preparation confiscated to bail out the unprepared. This is the redistribution that Section 47 enables. From the prudent to the profligate, from savers to spenders, from citizens to the government. If you own precious metals, Section 47 validates your concerns about the system while threatening your solution. For years you've understood that. The dollar is being debased, the debt is unsustainable, the financial system is fragile, hard assets are the only reliable protection. Section 47 proves you are right. The government would not create confiscation powers if precious metals were irrelevant. They would not target your wealth if it did not threaten their system. The very existence of Section 47 is an admission that precious metals matter. Private ownership of real money is a challenge to government power. Your stack represents an exit they want to close. This is vindication of the darkest kind. You were right about the danger. Now the danger is coming for you. But vindication does not mean defeat. Section 47 exists, but it has not been activated. You still have time to prepare. You still have options. Let me address the options honestly. Option 1. Domestic physical holdings. Metal in your home, your safe, buried in your yard. This is the most vulnerable to confiscation because you are within U.S. jurisdiction, but it is also the hardest to enforce because it requires physical search. The government may know you bought silver, but they cannot know exactly where it is. Risk: prosecution if you do not comply. Benefit: continued possession if enforcement is imperfect. Many people in 1933 simply did not surrender their gold. The government knew some people were non-compliant, but could not find them all. Option 2. Foreign storage. Metal held in vaults outside the United States, Switzerland, Singapore, the Cayman Islands. This removes your metal from direct U.S. jurisdiction. Confiscation orders may not extend to foreign holdings. Risk. The government could criminalize foreign metal ownership, making it illegal even if they cannot seize it. Benefit. Cross-border enforcement is extremely difficult. Option 3. Conversion to other assets before confiscation. If you see the emergency coming, you could sell metals and purchase other hard assets. Real estate, productive businesses, foreign assets. These may not be subject to the same confiscation regime. Risk. Timing. Sell too early and you miss gains. Wait too long and confiscation is announced. Option 4. Numismatic conversion. Section 47 includes exemptions for numismatic collections of demonstrated historical significance. Converting bullion to rare coins with numismatic value might qualify for exemption. Risk. Exemptions will be narrow and discretionary. Bureaucrats deciding what qualifies will not be sympathetic. Benefit. You at least have an argument that bullion does not. Option 5. Non-compliance. Simply refuse to surrender. Hide your metals. Take the risk of prosecution. I am not recommending this. The penalties are severe. The risk is real. But historically, many people have chosen non-compliance with unjust laws. Some succeeded, some did not. Each option has trade-offs. None is perfectly safe. Section 47 is designed to make evasion difficult and compliance mandatory. But the existence of options means you are not helpless. You can prepare. You can position. You can make choices that reduce your vulnerability. The worst choice is doing nothing, ignoring Section 47, hoping it will not be activated, trusting that the government will not use powers it has granted itself. The government will use these powers. The question is when, not if. Your preparation should assume activation is coming. So, what should you do with this information? Let me give you actionable steps. First, read Section 47 yourself. Do not take my word for it. The legislation is public record. Search for the Financial Stability and Emergency Response Act. Find Section 47. Read the language. Understand exactly what it authorizes. Knowledge is your first defense. Second, assess your vulnerability. How much of your precious metals holdings are traceable? What purchases triggered reporting requirements? What dealers have your information? The more traceable your holdings, the more vulnerable you are to enforcement. Untraceable holdings are harder to confiscate. Third, consider foreign storage. This is not for everyone. It has costs and complications. But for significant holdings, moving metal outside U.S. jurisdiction provides protection that domestic storage cannot. Research vault options in Switzerland, Singapore, and other stable jurisdictions. Understand the legal requirements for foreign asset reporting. Make informed decisions. Fourth, evaluate numismatic options. Pre-1933 gold coins have historically been exempt from confiscation orders. Rare coins with numismatic value may qualify for exemptions under Section 47. Consult with numismatic experts. Understand what qualifies as historically significant. Position your holdings to maximize exemption arguments. Fifth, diversify your hard assets. Precious metals are valuable, but that are now specifically targeted. Real estate, productive land, foreign assets, physical commodities. Consider spreading your wealth across asset classes that may not be subject to Section 47. Sixth, document your legal arguments. If confiscation is ordered, there will be legal challenges. The constitutionality of Section 47 is questionable. The Fifth Amendment requires just compensation. The Fourth Amendment protects against unreasonable seizures. Having legal arguments prepared does not guarantee success, but it provides options that surrendering immediately does not. Section 47 is law, but laws can be repealed. Public pressure can limit enforcement. Political organizing can change outcomes. If compliance is not forthcoming, the policy fails. Your preparation, your organization, your resistance matter. They determine whether Section 47 succeeds or fails. This is RateScope. The bill is passed. The powers exist. The clock is ticking. RateScope, signing off.